dim ancient ancestry? Well, the answer is if they live on a world where these things periodically, cyclically occur, that would be the Occam's Razor answer, that they're simply telling us their version of a larger history, a larger truth. Now, the fifth world, the one we're in now, is supposed to be destroyed by earthquake. When John says that the Maya never refer to the end of this cycle as a cataclysmic or catastrophic or potentially world-ending period. And by the way, when we talk about the end of the world, no, the planet will go on. Let us make no mistake about that. Unless something really weird happened, the planet will continue on as it has for billions of years. The problem is that we are such a tiny fraction of the biosphere that any hiccup which seriously disturbs the biosphere completely, except to the 0.001 level, eliminates us. And that's, of course, what the Maya and the Aztecs and the other derivative cultures are saying. These world ages do not end quietly. And yes, they may be transformative, but so is falling down a flight of stairs. I would prefer to avoid both. So in worst case terms, in the worst case scenario, this is what happens to the world. It tilts. Now there's Hopi prophecy, and yes, the Hopi are connected to the Maya. Long story, you don't have time to go into it now. But the Hopi talk about water serpents living at the poles, connecting this idea with poles, and that if nature is not obeyed, if we don't correctly interpret the signs, the warriors that are keeping the serpents in check in this mythology will rise up and all will perish. That I found really remarkable here in the American Southwest, that there was a derivative culture which actually connects the potential end of the world to the poles. And then, of course, brings us back to the physics that I've been looking at. Because the only realistic way that that could happen is if we don't understand inertia, mass, rotation, angular momentum, etc., etc. And in fact, there are circumstances where the orderly and stately rotation of our planet could be radically changed, which means instead of looking out to the cosmos, we have to look within. We look within the Earth to look at the fields and structure of the planet on which we're standing. And it doesn't take much pursuit in the hyperdimensional model before you find that, yes, rotating objects in something called the Einstein-Cartan torsion field model not only generate waves in the ether, in the substratum of reality, in space-time, to use a more relativistic term, but those waves interact with each other. And under certain circumstances, in terms of alignments, in terms of geometry, these waves create such an interference pattern that the rotating objects need to seek a new rotational equilibrium. And as I said on the show, the only thing that the Earth can do under those circumstances is basically change the tilt of its axis. Yes, it might change the rate of its rotation, but the free parameter, which would allow the Earth to come back into some kind of resonance with this background cosmic etheric field, would be a change in the tilt of the axis. Now, that will not happen slowly or peacefully, and when that happens, the constants which apply to inertia and mass and a few other things do not all change in synchronization. It isn't a perfect... You know, on Star Trek, you've all seen something called inertial dampers, and the ship is supposed to have inertial dampers which damp out all these perturbations in the force, in the torsion field. And when they're not working, you see the crew thrown all around the set. Well, the Earth, in essence, operates under an inertial damping system. But under moments of stress, under moments of change, when the physics is changing to reach this new equilibrium, those inertial dampers would not be fully in operation. And all it takes, given the size and mass and energy of the systems we're talking about, is a 0.0001 differential, and you have yourself a very bad hair day. So, with that as background, what is the driver? What is the cosmic clock that is counting down. Why is 2012, even if it does sync with the Mayan calendar and the Gregorian calendar, and even if it does align roughly with the galactic center, as John Major Jenkins has said, and which is accurate, what makes December 21, 2012 different than December 21, 2011, or 2013? That's really where the science goes, and that's really where the critics obviously are focusing their attention, and it's an appropriate question to ask. What makes that date different than any other date? Well, for one thing, the Earth is not rotating smoothly. It is also doing another rotation called precession. The Earth rotates in 24 hours. The precession takes 26,000 years. That's a round number, but it's easy to remember. And in fact, that precession is synced up with our orbital rotation around the galaxy, which is a much longer time frame, covering something like 250 million years, which is 240 million. And because it takes us so long to go around this exquisite structure, in essence, for millennia, the alignment with the center of the galaxy is essentially the same. So we can forget our galactic motion and focus only on the fact that because of precession, the alignment of the solstices switches about every 13,000 years, which is half of the 26, so that we have a summer solstice at the alignment with the center of the galaxy 13,000 years ago and 13,000 years in the future. So one of my questions, obviously, was, well, which one is more interesting in the physics? Is the alignment now important, where we have Earth, Sun, galaxy center, or is it more important when you have the Earth and the galaxy and the Sun in the other alignment? That really is an undecided question yet, because we don't have enough data. We have to have some kind of historical data, and I haven't been able to really find it, because it's not going to be sitting right in plain sight. It's going to be a derivative conclusion based on other information. I do know we're coming up on this major alignment with the galactic center, and there are other factors that will coincide, because nothing ever happens all by itself. There's a synchronization. And my strong suspicion is that the driver that makes 2012 different has to do with unseen massive planets orbiting on the periphery of the solar system, as Mike and I have discussed for several years. And it is the coincidence in time of where they are versus where the Earth, Sun, and galactic center are that makes the 2012 time frame particularly suspicious, dangerous, something to really watch. But as we go through this, you will see that that may or may not be borne out by the facts. Bottom line, we know historically, this is a book by two gentlemen, Allen and Dallaire, who one is a geophysicist, the other, I forget what discipline of the sciences, but they're both from Oxford. They wrote this book, which was initially called The Day the Earth Nearly Died, and then they changed it to Cataclysm, which I think is a weaker title. But there's a very important quote. Among the fundamental geophysical effects experienced by Earth in the past, looking at the geophysical record, were massive fracturing of the crust, a realignment of the Earth's axis, elevation of new mountains, and widespread rearrangement of land and sea. These changes were accompanied by an appalling global conflagration, a gigantic flood, and what has been described as collapsed sky conditions. We'll get to that in a minute. The point is that these are geologists looking at the physical record. And as recently as 13,000 years ago, which is why that question about which of the alignments is really crucial or more important, we find very widespread evidence of exactly the thing we don't want to find. And it coincides, more or less, to the half cycle of the 26,000-year period. Now, again, the mainstream guys, when they look at this data, they dismiss it because in Newtonian physics, or even in relativity, there's no way for the Earth to do that. That's impossible by their worldview. Well, in science, a lot of the things that we think are impossible with new data turn out to be not only